fresh outlook. One of the highest level whistleblowers to ever emerge from the NSA spoke at a conference this week, saying he was disgusted by Washington's move towards mass surveillance. William Binney was a leading codebreaker against the Soviet Union during the Cold War, but resigned after September 11th, disgusted by Washington's new move, which he calls total population control. Here's more on that story.
The National Security Agency and FBI have monitored the emails of prominent Muslim Americans, including a political candidate, several civil rights activists, academics, and lawyers, under secretive procedures intended to target terrorists and foreign spies. The story that was put forward by Glenn Greenwald and Mortaza Hussein indicates that leaked documents were published on a website called The Intercept. Greenwald discovered the surveillance on a spreadsheet leaked by Edward Snowden of email addresses that were monitored under the provisions of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA, which, as the article details, can be used to target individuals who merely may, in the future, engage in criminal activity. The 5 Americans whose email accounts were monitored by the NSA and FBI have all led highly public, outwardly exemplary lives. Some have even climbed the ranks of the U.S. national security and foreign policy establishments. All 5 individuals vehemently deny any involvement in terrorism or espionage. It is unclear whether the government obtained any legal permission to monitor the Americans on the list. A statement released Wednesday by U.S. Department of Justice said intelligence agencies never monitored political, religious, or activist figures solely because they disagree with public policies or criticize the government or for exercising constitutional rights.
Dee Dee Benkie and Dr. Sanders continue our discussions. We also welcome Dr. Bart Rossi, and joining us from our D.C. studios is David Sun, president of Sunblock Systems. Welcome, David. Well, we're going to start things off.
Thank you, Mia.
Thank you. Well, we're going to start things off by talking. This is something we've talked about so much, but now it's crossing over the borders. German Chancellor Angela Merkel is obviously very upset and has been very outspoken with some harsh words for the United States on this, for spying on our friends and allies. We'll start things off with Dee Dee.
I think she has a reason to be upset. Look, you know, when we monitor those who could possibly be terrorists, chatter, give any sort of reason at all, understandable. But why are we spying on our friends, and why are we spying on Americans that are innocent? And I'm very much against this, taking the net, taking everyone's information and see if we can find something. I don't like that at all. It's wrong.
Well, you know, and there's a cost involved here, and with that we want to check in with our new friend, David Sun, president of Sunblock Systems. David, obviously this comes at a cost when we are starting to do surveillance on people. Just tell us a little bit about your company and the costs that are associated with surveillance like this.
Well, at Sunblock Systems, we're a consulting group that does investigations mostly for corporations and other entities like that. And what we do is, you know, we look at employees or other individuals who may be, you know, exhibiting some suspect behavior. And so what we do is we'll investigate them for cyber crimes, intellectual property theft, and things like that.
Well, what are your thoughts on, you know, surveillance on individuals here in the States? I mean, obviously there is a war on terror, but what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, my general thoughts, and I'm not speaking specifically to, you know, the NSA piece or anything like that, but from an investigation standpoint, my general thoughts are that, you know, when you're investigating an act or an activity or a problem, you know, you can't always be extremely focused on what you're looking at right off the bat. A lot of times there's a lot of, you have to cast a broad net, so to speak, to help narrow down into what you're really going to dive deeply into down the road. Because at the beginning you don't really know, or it's not for certain who the individuals are or what the issue is. And so sometimes that's going to happen. You're going to have this incidental collection that goes on.
Well, let's talk about some of the high-ranking, and David, we'll check in with you in a little bit. Let's talk about some of the politicians and folks like that who are also, if you want to call it, being spied on. Just thoughts on all this.
Well, first thing, Unfortunately, this is not a new thing. And of course, spying on American citizens goes back at least as far as Martin Luther King. We know the FBI spied on him in all kinds of ways. What we really need to do, it seems to me, is have a very open and legitimate and frank public debate about government surveillance. One of the real problems we have is that the Supreme Court has been very vague on the standards. We have a secret court called FISA. I'm shocked that we would have such a secret court. The appointment to those courts is made by the Chief Justice. Really, we should have a balance of people serving on that court. It should not be totally secret. There may be parts of the opinions of the court that might be appropriately secret, but not the whole panoply of reasoning. And then thirdly, there should be real adversarial argumentation before this court. At the moment, there is not. The administration only presents its side, but the other side doesn't really get any kind of adversarial position. So we need a real frank debate here.
And speaking of the administration, this whistleblower, William Binney, he's come out with pretty harsh words for both the with both the Obama and Bush administrations.
Absolutely, because I think, Mia, what's happening here is that there's the tendency to go too far. If you're going to have surveillance, I mean, how much is enough? We want to be secure, that's for sure. But the tendency for people to go too far, we see it every day in the political system. We see who's going too far, who's saying things that are just outrageous. And when it comes to spying, it's the same tendency. So again, what is the line and how do we address this situation? And how do we all develop a mental set that works, because we're all going to have our own privacy invaded? That's what's going to happen.
And I do agree that there should be some sort of a national conversation on this, because I'm not sure all Americans are on board with all this surveillance. David Sun, you work in this business. Do you find that to be true?
Most definitely. I mean, I'll agree with the panelists that there should be an adversarial component to this process to ensure that we don't go too far. But really, the question is how far is too far, and who helps to decide that.
Let's talk about American businesses, and then I want to talk about overseas and some of the news from overseas. Just American businesses, do you think that American businesses are suffering from this?
From spying or by being spies themselves? I mean,
being spied on by their employers.
There are two sides to this. I mean, businesses spy on each other and spy on the government and spy on other governments, but they are also spied on by other governments as well. I mean, this is a whole big issue. It's a whole new issue because the capacities for spying through the internet and through the computer technologies of today have multiplied the capacities of people to spy in all kinds of ways. That's why I think we need a full and complete conversation about what this means, because all kinds of entities, not just the government, are spying.
This is called population control. What this guy says is very scary. I don't want KGB in my life. I mean, look, we're the United States of America. We need to not accept this, and not say, okay, what's going to happen? Let's accept it.
I think it's mushrooming. I think we're all in agreement there.
I agree with you. It's
going too far, and it's going to continue. And to answer your question, I think it's going to be a very big issue with the spying from one corporation to the other, and where's the line? And how do we address that?
And like you said, Dr. Saunders, it goes both ways. IP thieves are stealing from their employers as well.
Now what's interesting is that the United States Supreme Court has started to take some baby steps in this direction and going into this area. Now they're baby steps because they should really be much more aggressive in their reasoning and in exploring this issue. But they have decided that a GPS system tied to a car is unconstitutional. They've decided that tracking cell phones, or the latest cell phone, or actually not tracking cell phones, but looking into a person's cell phone without a warrant is unconstitutional. So there's some encouragement, and of course the Supreme Court is conservative. So there's a possibility of liberals and conservatives joining forces here and looking into this.
I do want to talk about what's happened with this latest whistleblower coming out and the news from overseas. Of course, we had the German Chancellor speaking out with some harsh words, and also Vladimir Putin. Let's not forget in his 4-hour
Mr. KGB himself.
4-hour talk show that he does every week. Goes on and on and on. But he did say it's hard to talk to people who speak in whispers because they're afraid of American eavesdropping.
Okay, seriously, from him, but no credibility whatsoever. That's a joke from Putin.
But don't you think this does bring up the case that the U.S. and Europe really need to be united right now?
Yes, but of course we have to also have a frank conversation about what the Europeans do in terms of spying. They're not just innocent victims. Now, that's not to say that what we did, particularly with the Chancellor, is appropriate or right. I mean, we have to take accountability of our own actions, but we should also be careful because every country spies on every other
Absolutely.
country.
But I think it's not been as bad in our country. Lately, I
right.
think we have crossed the line, and we're
Right.
being more like
I
Europe.
agree.
We're being more like Russia.
I think right, and I also think that after September 11th, the game changed here.
Right.
Well,
and also with technology.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
everything's been changing.
True,
It's been
very much so, very
changing so quickly. Let's weigh in with David right now in Washington, D.C. You've been hearing any our panel's discussion. Any thoughts?
I mean, I'll agree that the issue of spying among corporations, I mean, that this is not just a nation-state issue. It's corporations. Not only are they being spied upon by other nation-states, but they're spying on each other. I mean, the issue with intellectual property theft and employees who take sensitive documents with them when they go from one employer or one company to their new one.
Well, I was
take
just
that
gonna...
intellectual property and this capabilities with them. I mean, this goes on all the time.
And I was just going to say, this is how American businesses can suffer. A lot of thieves can steal electronic data from their employers, and you even said that the IP thieves are just like your everyday office workers.
Most definitely. I mean, they're people who are at the office and insert a little USB drive into the computer and copy a couple documents off, and they're stealing the documents. It's they look at it as no different than copying a movie or downloading a song. Who are they hurting is the question that they always put in their head.
You don't want to get your employees mad.
They are hurting somebody. There's somebody.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's human behavior. And at some point, we all want to get a little bit of an edge, help ourselves on the job. But when it really crosses the line and we're going to try to strike back at the employer or take documents and really undermine that company, now we're going into a different direction. And I see more of that happening. I think that there's going to be more and more dissatisfied employees acting out, trying to be whistleblowers or junior Snowdens, if you will, and they're going to try to, based on their behavior, that's what they're going to do.
But it's kind of like a couple years ago, and this is maybe not the greatest analogy, but you used to have a television, now you have to pay for everything. It used to be companies didn't have to pay for these things, so that's all going into their costs to protect themselves.
Right.
Well, I think it's a mess now with government, with companies. I mean, we have to be vigilant. Right. It's really just exploded.
Right.
All right, final thoughts. David, we'll check in with you first. Final thoughts.
I mean, this is definitely going to be a major issue. It's coming to the forefront as the technology matures and technology becomes more and more part of everybody's lives. This is just going to be an evolving issue that we're going to have to follow closely, and there'll be some interesting decisions that come down the road by the different organizations involved.
David Sun, thank you for your time. That's again David Sun, president of Sunblock Systems. And keep it here to Fresh Outlook, where we also take a look at stories trending on the internet. Up next, we'll talk to a Kentucky woman who says she was fired for saying, "Have a blessed day." We're not joking. We'll have that story coming up when we return.